you doing? Oh, don't do that.
But wait, what's World of Warships? World of Warships is the naval action MMO, dipping into the world of large-scale sea battles of the first half of the 20th century. Epic battles range across the oceans of the world in order to claim victory among teams comprised of the greatest representatives from an era of multi-ton marine giants. In order to achieve victory in battle, players must enjoy a wide range of strategy and a variety of tactical decisions. Sudden ambushes, cunning flanking attacks, open confrontation, and head-on assaults. Captains must strive to find an ideal way to deliver a decisive blow at the enemy. Tactical diversity in World of Warships comes from the inclusion of many different classes of warships, including aircraft carriers capable of providing remote air support and striking targets at extreme range, colossal battleships that protect power across a vast swath of ocean, and light and heavy cruisers with the capability to respond quickly to changing battlefield conditions. Stealthy and agile destroyers can be highly effective in group attacks. So don't wait. Join World of Warships today for free and rule the oceans.
Hello, kiddies. Let's take a step back in time. It was pre-dawn, October 25th, 1944. Admiral Takeo Kurita stares to the horizon towards Leyte Gulf, having earlier feigned retreat with his very powerful center force comprising of 4 big gun battle wagons, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. At the head of the center force was Admiral Kurita's flagship, Battleship Yamato, a 72,000-ton behemoth sporting 9 18.1-inch Mark 94 main guns, the heaviest, most powerful super big gun battle wagon to ever sail the seas. Confident in this center force, Kurita's confidence was further strengthened by Admiral William Halsey taking his powerful Third Fleet north after what he thought was Japan's main force, including Japan's carriers. Now Kurita had open water until he reached the 130,000 men of the U.S. Sixth Army and annihilate them. Hopefully nothing goes wrong, thought Admiral Kurita as he noticed the first rays of light piercing over the horizon. In the pre-dawn hours, St. Lo, an escort carrier of Taffy 3, launched 4 anti-submarine planes, whilst the other carriers of Taffy 3 prepared for the day's airstrikes in support of the landings. At 6:37 a.m., Ensign William C. Brooks and his Grumman TBF Avenger sighted a number of ships he initially thought was Halsey's main fleet of the Third Fleet, but then to his horror he realized they were Japanese. He quickly radioed in, and in arduous Admiral Sprague wanted verification. That's when Brooks retorted, and I quote, "I can see pagoda masts. I can see the biggest damn meatball flag on the biggest damn battleship I have ever seen. The Yamato, a battleship that displaced more than all of Taffy 3 combined." At 6:45, Kurita's center force had achieved complete tactical surprise, preparing to open fire. Meanwhile, near Samar, Taffy 3, the thin center line of 7th Fleet, Taffy 3 included 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. The bulk of 7th Fleet was far south of Taffy 3, while Halsey's 3rd Fleet headed north. Taffy 3 was set up for shore support and anti-sub patrols. Little did Taffy 3 know Kurita's center force was bearing down on them. Taffy 3 CO Admiral Clifton Sprague felt somewhat uneasy about the situation. Squalls were forming not far from Taffy 3's current position. Soon after daylight, the opening salvos on Taffy 3 began. Thinking it was the main carriers, though it was the escort carriers, small and light, and definitely not a match for the capital ships' sheer might. So Sprague turned his carriers towards the squalls in an effort to escape the jaws of death clamping on them by way of Kurita's center force. The engagement had just turned hot, and preparing to leave the squalls and under orders to attack the center force and leading a torpedo run was a Fletcher-class destroyer DD-557. Leaving the squall, bearing down on the center force, Captain Ernest Evans aboard the USS Johnston caught his first sight of the Japanese ships. Luckily, the aircraft carriers had launched all planes to attack the center force, and the U.S. air power started raining hell on Korea's center force, who had no air cover. Then USS Johnston charges with 14-inch shells landing all around her. Eventually, the mighty Yamato opened up a salvo of her 18-inch guns. 3 hits landed on the USS Johnston. The Johnston was being hammered and eventually crippled, though her fire crews stabilized the Johnston and she was back on the attack. It would take more than that to open this tin can on this day. Korea's cruisers had engaged the light aircraft carriers and was causing some major damage to them. The Japanese older fire control systems included in each ship optical rangefinders and colored dye in the ammo to identify shots. But rain and smoke can easily affect the system. With multicolored shells exploding all around them, one sailor quipped, "They're shooting at us in Technicolor." Suddenly, Evans hears major explosions and sees the plumes of smoke from the heavy cruiser Kumano. He then remembers launching 10 torpedoes. The USS Johnston was suffering major damage from the Yamato. The only stay of execution was Yamato's armor-piercing shells were so big they were over-penetrating and not exploding within the Johnston's hull. Suddenly, an 18.1-inch shell landed midships, damaging the USS Johnston's engine, reducing speed to 17 knots. Then another shell hit 2/3 down the ship, cutting power to all of her 5-inch guns. Luckily, the USS Johnston was now in a squall while also hiding in her own smoke, where a shirtless Captain Evans had to reload and relocate his command to the stern of the ship due to damage to the wheelhouse. USS Johnston eventually turned to head back to relative safety, and the USS Johnston met 3 destroyer escorts en route to battle, led by the Samuel B. Roberts. Captain Evans, not one to run from a fight, came about to do what they could to support the 3 destroyer escorts. The USS Johnston then briefly engaged the heavy cruiser Chikuma. At 8:30 a.m., the USS Johnston opened up on a much larger cruiser that had targeted the Gambier Bay, a severely wounded escort carrier, scoring multiple hits, securing the ship's fate. This possibly was the Haguro. At 8:40, Evans spotted an even more pressing matter: 7 destroyers led by a light cruiser, the Yahagi. Evans had secured the best possible position by crossing the T, bringing all his guns to bear. Evans ordered open fire, and the Johnston unleashed all she had on the lead ship, hoping to move them. And by 9 o'clock, the USS Johnston had driven off the Yahagi and her accompanying destroyers, but by 9:40 a.m., with smoke bellowing and listing, the USS Johnston was dead in the water. At 9:45, Captain Evans signaled to abandon ship. And 25 minutes later, the tin can that could slipped beneath the waves with 186 of her crew. Captain Ernest E. Evans was last seen abandoning ship, the last anyone would ever see Evans again. It was at this time a Japanese destroyer, the Yukikaze, cruised slowly by, and a few American sailors saw the captain and his men saluting the USS Johnston in a show of respect. But yet this was not the end. For at the same time the USS Johnston was in the fight of its life to save Taffy 3, so too was the destroyer escort known as the USS Samuel B. Roberts, the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship. A John C. Butler class destroyer escort it was. At 7:35 a.m., the Samuel B. Roberts, heading into battle at flank speed towards the heavy cruiser Chukai, Commander Copeland addressed his crew. "We're making a torpedo run. The outcome is doubtful, but we will do our duty nonetheless." The Roberts had engaged the Chukai, and she didn't lower her main guns enough to use them. Suddenly, Bam! A torpedo severed Chikai's stern. For the better part of an hour, Copeland maneuvered Roberts all around the watery battlefield until around 8:51 the Japanese landed 2 hits, one damaging the aft 5-inch gun. This gun's breech exploded shortly after, wounding and killing several men. With only one 5-inch gun left, Roberts bore down on the heavy cruiser Chikuma, getting it as much as it could give, destroying her number 3 gun turret. Unfortunately, around this time, battleship Congo slammed the Samuel B. Roberts with 3 14-inch shells, tearing a 40-foot by 10-foot gash on her port side. The Samuel B. Roberts crew commenced to abandon ship. The Samuel B. Roberts sank in 30 minutes. 90 crewmen lost their lives, whilst the other 120 that abandoned ship had to float on rafts for days. Both the Samuel B. Roberts and USS Johnston received Presidential Unit citations, and the Samuel B. Roberts also received the Bronze Star. The USS Johnston, along with this Presidential Unit citation, Captain Ernest E. Evans posthumously received the Medal of Honor, and Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz wrote this: "The success of Taffy 3 was nothing short of special dispensation from the Lord Almighty." These events begs the question, how did Taffy 3 turn away a much larger Japanese center force, sporting many times the firepower of Taffy 3? A center force who had tactical surprise at the battle's outset. Let's see. Firstly, Kurita mistakenly thought he was chasing fast attack carriers. The heavy clouds and black smoke gave the Japanese fits in locating targets and identifying them. Though Admiral Kurita still had all control of his battleships, he had lost all cohesion with his cruiser and destroyer divisions, who were running around the battlefield. However, and with this lost coordination, the Johnston and Roberts was able to take advantage. Finally, Kurita received word that the Southern Fleet had been destroyed the night before, coupled with the thought that he had already sunk a few of the large American carriers, not knowing that it was actually carrier escorts he had sunk. He decided to carry out orders of, at 9:20, he ordered all ships my course north, speed 20, aiming for the Leyte Gulf until he caught wind of another American carrier group to the north. He ultimately turned to attack this ghost carrier group that was not even there. And so Kurita, passing back through the San Bernardino Strait, the smaller, heavily damaged American force kept pressure until Kurita was well gone out of the area. Part of the largest naval engagement in history, the Battle off Samar was over, but many sailors were not out of harm's way. Due to the epic failure of the 7th Fleet's communications and a reluctance to expose rescue ships to sub-attack, an overwhelming number of Taffy 3 survivors, including those from USS Johnston and USS Samuel B. Roberts, spent 2 or more days adrift before they were finally rescued. A plane had spotted the survivors but radioed the wrong coordinates, causing many sailors to die of exposure, thirst, and shark attacks. Finally, an infantry landing craft of Task Group 78.12 arrived on scene, and its captain started the trend of asking sports questions to determine friend or foe. One profound thing I take away from the Battle of Samar was how inept and unused the most powerful battle wagon to ever sail the seas was. It caused a little bit of damage to a destroyer, but that was it. It had no other impact. And how the grit and determination of a tin can and an escort's commanders and crew was enough to stave off certain annihilation of Taffy 3 and save untold lives at the landing of the beaches. This big Yamato, it was a major non-factor in this engagement, and it only suffered superficial damage, whilst the other IJN battleships suffered major damage. And on top of that, Japan had lost 3 of 4 heavy cruisers, as well as the heavily damaged battleships. The total Battle off Samar losses were: Taffy 3 lost 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, 1 destroyer escort, 23 aircraft, 4 damaged escort carriers, 1 damaged destroyer, 1 damaged cruiser, and 1,116 MIA/KA losses. The IJN Center Force had 3 heavy cruisers sunk, 3 heavily damaged cruisers, 2 battleships heavily damaged, 11 lost aircraft, and 1 destroyer damaged with 2,700 KIA. The Battle of Samar was a quantifiable David versus Goliath, and though the comms were basically wrecked, Taffy 3 was able to use its surroundings to take the fight to Kurita's deadly center force, and this was a tactical victory, saving untold lives and to ensure a successful invasion of the 6th Army. I salute all these men who gave it their all in a fight they shouldn't have won, but against all odds did. I also salute their Japanese counterparts who were just doing their duty under orders from an expansionist, power-hungry group of top military brass who in their arrogance sent many men to die, resolving to using kamikaze tactics from this point on. The warmongers in Japan were scared, very scared, for they saw at the Battle of Samar that the Americans were samurai also. And this is Big Duke 6. Until next time.
What are you doing? No, don't do that.